Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the Games We Play podcast. This is going to be a new show that I'm starting up. My name is Brindley. I am your host. And on the Games We Play podcast, I take you through my thoughts of the latest news from the games that we play, from sports to video games, the mind games that you play with that person that you're talking to right now. Any sort of game is fair game. I've got some fun topics lined up for this episode today. But before we get started, I have to ask you this. Please let me know what you think of the podcast. Tweet me at Brian Brindley. Find me on Facebook by searching at Rio Brian Brindley, or comment below this podcast. All thoughts, questions, comments, concerns are appreciated. Keep in mind that this is the pilot episode. I want to see how this goes. If you like it, share it with your friends. It would really help me out. But with all this, the preamble out of the way, let's get right into it. Topic 1 is the Boston Celtics. It's a topic that everybody in the sports world is talking about right now. The Boston Celtics appear to be imploding. Kyrie Irving looks all but determined to walk away from the Celtics in free agency. Reports are that he is, quote, ghosting the organization. And it looks like Al Horford's going to walk away now, which is a huge loss for the Celtics. I feel like Al Horford was more of a leader on the team than Kyrie Irving was, certainly. Kyrie Irving seemed to not get along with the younger guys, and I feel like it was just a bad mix in the kind of attitude and leadership characteristics that Kyrie has. But Horford was a guy that definitely had a more embracing attitude towards the younger guys, and I think that they looked up to him more and respected him more as a player. And the initial word was that he was going to try to re-sign with Boston, but it looks like that's no longer the case. And, of course, the other part that we have to really talk about when it comes to the Boston Celtics falling apart is that Gordon Hayward and it's not their fault. Again, it's not Gordon Hayward's fault. It's really nobody's fault. But ever since that first game that he played for Boston, when he got that, horrific injury, he just isn't the same player. And that's not his fault. That's not Boston's fault. Danny Ainge didn't know that was going to happen to the guy. It's just unfortunate. That's the most unfortunate part of this collapse. I see a lot of people celebrating the Celtics collapse. It's probably because Danny Ainge was, doing what Danny Ainge does and talking a lot of smack. But I can't help but feel bad for some of the guys on that Celtics team, especially the younger guys who kind of got this giant set of expectations put onto them. And I think that they've done a good job. The younger guys especially have done actually a very good job of being mature, of doing the right things, and growing at the right pace. Obviously, a guy like Jason Tatum kind of fell off this year, but there's usually a sophomore slump, especially for star players. It seems like that's more often the case than not. I think he'll grow from that. And, of course, the other key part that I almost forgot to mention right now is the Celtics might also lose Terry Rozier, which would be devastating because they were in just a few months ago in a great position of having two great point guards who were able to take control of a game. Obviously had the whole scary Terry run 2 years ago in the playoffs, and obviously it didn't end well for the Celtics this year in the playoffs. But because Kyrie kind of gave Terry Rozier the shaft, and because he is the better point guard out of the two, but I don't blame Terry Rozier for being upset about not getting as much playing time. He probably should be a starting point guard in this league. So, you're losing a lot of people. Can't help but feel bad for the team a little bit, but that's just, I never want to see a team fail necessarily. I think it's good for the sport, no matter what the sport is, when all the teams are in good positions at least to make a playoff run. And, don't count them out. It is still the East. I still think that they have a decent enough squad put together right now with a good enough coach to take themselves to the playoffs. I mean, Doc Rivers showed you this year on the Clippers that you don't have to have the best roster to take a team to the playoffs as long as you have a really good coach and you have hardworking players, which I think a lot of the Boston Celtics are. So they're definitely not going to be the dynasty that Danny Ainge was touting about, but you never know. They might still be in the playoff picture next year, and probably a first or, God willing for them, a second-round exit, but it's just kind of unfortunate for them. I don't know what else really to say on the topic. And speaking of NBA teams that appear to be falling apart, we move next to the Houston Rockets. Another team, this time in the West, that has been proclaiming for years that their time is up next, that they're the team of the future. The Houston Rockets, Daryl Morey, James Harden, Mike D'Antoni, Chris Paul. You listen to some of these names, and you're like, oh, a team composed of that, they had a shot at taking down the Warriors last year. Went to Game 7, obviously, in the Western Conference Finals. Chris Paul gets hurt in Game 6. Or was it Game 5? I actually don't remember off the top of my head. But he got hurt late in the series, and that really killed them down the stretch. Obviously, the Rockets missing an insane amount of threes in Game 7 really put them to bed. But they were really that close. And it's just unfortunate to see with these recent reports about Chris Paul that it seems like they're actually not even going to be close to contending if the rumors are believed to be true. Now, it's important to note, first we'll talk about the rumors itself. I believe it came from a Yahoo Sports writer. Let me go ahead and Google his name. So basically, the report that he put out, and he was on First Things First and all this, all the regular roundabout of all the talk shows on Fox Sports, and I don't remember if he went on ESPN or not. But basically the report was that Vincent Goodwill, that's his name. It says Chris Paul wants out as relationship with James Harden deemed unsalvageable. Basically, the crux of the article said that Chris Paul wants out of Houston. He doesn't think him and James Harden aren't getting along. There was, when he went on First Things First, he was talking to Nick Wright and Chris Carter about how there was like petty squabbles. Like the specific case he cited as like an example was that James Harden supposedly after practices when they get extra shoot around likes to go on his own separate basket. He likes to go and shoot some baskets on his own, just kind of get in his zone. Like you see a lot of players do that, especially if you're the star player on the team, which James Harden unquestionably is. No matter, I think Chris Paul has somewhat of a tough time dealing with the fact that he is not the star of the team. He's not the darling of the Houston Rockets organization. It's actually James Harden. But anyway, so James Harden would go and shoot on the other end of this court kind of by himself, kind of getting in the zone and focusing up, getting extra practice in. And according to the writer, who I'm going to have to look at his name again just because I'm terrible, Vincent Goodwill from Yahoo Sports. According to him, Chris Paul would then, on some occasions, like take a rookie over and start playing one-on-one on that hoop, which if you've ever even shot around in a gym, you know that when you're trying to shoot, there's a courtesy. There's you shoot, next person shoots, following person shoots. There's a nice cadence, there's a nice rhythm to it so that you're not all shooting on the same basket, and then when you have a shot that's good, it gets knocked out because somebody else is just being kind of, rude and basically shooting on their own. The way I read into that is that Chris Paul understands, undoubtedly being a professional basketball player, that kind of courtesy that you're supposed to provide somebody else, and just kind of messing with him for whatever reason. That article also talked about how there were points where they would go weeks, and I believe he even said like above a month at some points in the season without talking to each other. I don't know if I believe every detail of the article, and it is important for me to point out that Chris Paul went to Instagram and said that, he said, "News to me," I think was his response to it. Maybe that was just specifically about the trade. Maybe that was more about the chemistry issues with James Harden and him. Maybe it's more about some specific examples cited. I want to say that as somebody that's studying to be a sports journalist, something that I think people often get wrong when they talk about what journalists are and what we do. A journalist, yes, clicks are important. They're emphasized in the newsroom. You need to have an audience that's following you, or else your job is really nothing. You're just kind of shouting to an empty chamber. But very rarely would anybody just completely fabricate a story. That is extremely unlikely. That is a fireable offense, and if you get caught doing that, not only will you be fired from your current job, unless you are one of the top journalists in the business, you will not get another job back. It almost, in a not a sports sense, but look at Brian Williams. Brian Williams eventually got a job back, but if he was not at that level that he was at for the amount of stories that he made up, absolutely he would not have been hired back. So I believe the reporting to an extent. Now, do I believe every single part of the report? I don't know if I believe the pettiness. That example I cited of him going to play one-on-one on the same basket that James Harden's practicing on. I don't know if I believe it to that extent. That seems a little bit, like, okay, maybe that happened once, but that's not like, that might not have been just a petty thing. Maybe the other basket was flooded with players, and he was like, I'm going to go over on this basket. James has got his headphones in. I'm just going to play on this basket, try to stay out of his way. So I don't know if it's to the level that it's kind of alluded to be in the article, but it's something to keep an eye on for sure. The important thing to know here is even if there's friction between James Harden and Chris Paul's not going anywhere. Nobody's going to take that contract. I thought maybe the Knicks would be foolish enough to take it just because it's the New York Knicks, and let's face it, they're a perpetual walking L of a basketball organization. They're kind of on the come up, though. Probably going to draft R.J. Barrett tomorrow, so we'll see how that goes. But apparently they sent the offer to New York thinking in the same thought process that I was, and even the New York Knicks declined it. So next in line is the Suns. They're right down the road from me, so if anybody besides the Knicks was going to take that contract, it would be the Suns, and I'm pretty sure they're not going to take it. I'm almost positive the Suns would not fall for that. God willing, because I think the Suns have enough problem as is without taking on a horrific contract like the one Chris Paul's under right now. But that's just something to keep an eye on. And then the other thing is, even if they did get rid of Chris Paul, can James Harden attract the kind of talent? He's a one-man show for the most part. Obviously, he's gotten much better at passing. His assist numbers have gone up. But he's just not the kind of guy that you really want to... It's kind of hard to get other superstars to play with him, because if it didn't work with Chris Paul, that's a strike against him. He obviously had to leave. Well, he was shipped away from Oklahoma City when Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook were on his team. Now, granted, that one shouldn't really count against him because that's not his choice. And also, that was just a weird situation where OKC was luckily unlucky is what I like to call it. But I'm not sure if he can attract the kind of co-star if Chris Paul were to leave that would make them legitimate championship contenders. The West, in my opinion, is more wide open than people think it is. People think that it's going to be a cakewalk for LeBron and AD. I disagree. That can be a topic for the next show, breaking down exactly why I don't think that it is a foregone conclusion that those two and the Lakers are going to win the Western Conference and the NBA championship for that matter. But for now, we got to move on. So those are the two main topics for the show. Next thing we're going to do is what I like to call quickies, which are just like little kind of like quick thoughts about things that I saw that I don't really have enough information to build a whole topic on, but I can kind of talk for a couple minutes about it. So the funniest story of the day was, anybody who is on Twitter knows who Sports Talk Barry is. He's basically a troll account who has made his fame through basically defending LeBron James, propping up LeBron James and comparing him to Michael Jordan, also going very frequently after Tom Brady, and sometimes he'll do it in a very serious fashion of going through the stats and going through the actual accomplishments that they've had, and sometimes it'll be in a trolly manner, like any of his tweets on medical marijuana or not medical marijuana, just any marijuana really, are pretty hilarious when you look at his replies to major figures. And I would give his Twitter a look through, and if it's the kind of content you're interested in, I love trolling, so I think it's hilarious. But the best part about today is what he frequently will do is when there's major news to be broken in the NBA or in the NFL, what he'll do is he'll switch his Twitter icon to Ian Rappaport or Adrian Wojnarowski. And he switched his picture to Woj after the Chris Paul rumor broke. I'm sorry, it's just really funny. And basically, I don't have the full tweet up here. Let me see if I can pull it up. But basically, he made a tweet pretending to be Adrian Wojnarowski, and he said something to the effect of, joking around, pretending to be Woj, he said, I reported that during a practice, Chris Paul told James Harden that he had man boobs. Harden went to the locker room crying. like, what a sad scene or something like that. It's obviously a joke, obviously an exaggeration, a joke that he's just trying to bait people. And he got some actual verified accounts on Twitter to kind of like quote it and say, wow, this is crazy. But maybe the biggest person that he fooled is FS1's own Skip Bayless, the infamous Skip Bayless, who went on the air and basically talked about that rumor, that report. And Twitter just had a field day today with Skip Bayless for falling for that. And I personally had a field day with it as well. It was one of the funniest things. Barry's reaction to it was really hilarious. So yeah, that's just a quick little thing that I thought was hilarious. I think you should go look at it. Moving on, we've been doing a lot of sports news. And like I said, we're going to talk about more than just sports on this podcast because sports is my beat when I'm working at Cronkite Sports. And it's what I want to do in the future, but I also have other interests, and I want to keep this as kind of like a general interest, sort of personal thoughts podcast. So E3 was last week. I'm a pretty avid gamer for those of you that don't know me or don't know me that well. And during Nintendo's E3 Direct, they teased a Breath of the Wild sequel, and there's been a lot of speculation about whether it's going to be like the Majora's Mask to Breath of the Wild's Ocarina of Time. If that's the case, because from the trailer it does seem much darker, there's a lot of sinister music. It seems like it's going to be the same map, which is different. Majora's Mask had Termina, as Ocarina of Time had Hyrule. That's not really the point. The point is the tone, and Majora's Mask is my second favorite Zelda game of all time. Second or first, just depending how I'm feeling that day between it and the Wind Waker. But I would absolutely love this. A darker tone for Zelda has always worked for me. I think Twilight Princess gets a bad rap for trying to be too dark, but I think it actually succeeded. And obviously Majora's Mask is one of my favorite games of all time. So I think that the dark tone would lend to Zelda very well. I'm very excited for the sequel. We're not going to see it for at least 3 years, so I'm not holding my breath. Speaking of games, it looks like Marvel Studios is going to play this game with Avengers Endgame. They're putting it back in theaters. Article comes from James Whitbrook over at Gizmodo.com. And he writes, quote, this week Avengers Endgame came with just $50 million. This week Avengers Endgame came within just $50 million of toppling Avatar's domestic box office record. After a $3.51 million weekend brought it to an eye-watering $2,742,400,000. Wait, that is $2 trillion. Basically $2 trillion global gross. It came close to Avatar's record-breaking $2 trillion. It's basically 45 billion behind Avatar, or million. Jesus, I can't talk. Basically, it's close, within reach, but it didn't have enough steam behind it. Apparently, it wasn't going to crack that, and it was coming out of theaters. Theaters are starting to pull it. I'm assuming the theaters weren't filling up anymore because everybody's already seen it once or twice or 3 times, or the crazy people that see it like 10 times. So what Marvel is doing, apparently, Kevin Feige, who is the big boss of Marvel Studios, basically said that it's getting re-released in theaters, and not only is it getting re-released in theaters, they're adding content to it. It looks like there is going to be more end credit stuff, and it says the amount of new footage is unknown. Excuse me. It's not an extended cut, but there's going to be a few new things at the end of the movie is what it says, basically. If you stay and watch the movie after the credits, there'll be a deleted scene, a little tribute, and a few surprises, which will be next weekend. It's going to be going up against Toy Story 4. That's a big point of emphasis to make. And this is, the kind of games that you play in the movie business, especially if you want to break the heralded James Cameron's Avatar box office record, which I remember seeing that movie in theaters with my dad when it came out. That's kind of crazy to think about. That was a really long time ago. But yeah, that's just that story. Interesting. Might want to keep an eye on it. But to me, I did see a tweet from Jeff Thu, who is a YouTuber that I am very familiar with. His YouTube channel is called Mother's Basement. And he was saying that, wouldn't this technically be a different movie? If it has different content, it's a different cut of the movie, so wouldn't its numbers be separated? I'm not sure if that's true, and that made me wonder if, like, when they re-released The Phantom Menace, for example, in 3D, did that accumulate on top of The Phantom Menace's original cut? That's just something interesting to think about, and see if companies might do this in the future, especially movie studios might do this in the future. If they're close to a record but they need that little extra push, maybe they might add some content to a movie and re-release it. Other stuff, basically, my shout-outs for the week are this new song from YBN Cordae and Chance the Rapper. Let me see what it's called, just so that I can get it up. I was very ill-prepared for this podcast, as you could probably tell. It won't be like this all the time. It just is right now because I'm a big dumb doo-doo head. Bad Idea, featuring Chance the Rapper. Great song. I would go give it a listen. It's a little old now, but Drake's 2 new tracks are pretty great. If you haven't played the Infamous games, I've actually been playing through Infamous Second Son recently. Try to find a way to play them. If you have a PlayStation 3, go back and play Infamous 1 and 2. They are, I believe, in total better than what we were delivered with Second Son on PS4, but all 3 are good games. If you have a chance to play any of them, I would give them a shot. They're super fun to play. And other game I'm playing, 2K19. It's like $4 right now. If you're remotely interested, it's a great purchase to make. And that's actually going to be it. So thank you guys so much for listening. Once again, my name is Brian Brindley. This is the Games We Play podcast. Not sure how often I'm going to be doing this. As often as I can. I'm in a very busy 7 days a week work schedule, so we'll see how it goes. But like, share, subscribe. Let me know any improvements I can make, any topic suggestions, comments, questions, concerns. Once again, follow me on Twitter at Brian Brindley or on Facebook at Real Brian Brindley, and I will catch you guys in the next episode. Have a great day. Stay safe out there.